Hello and welcome to the Benefit of the Doubt YouTube channel. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Cliff Thomas. Cliff, good morning.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. So the reason we are here is because I recently took a test drive in a Tesla, and I have some feelings about it. But before we get into that, just a couple of things that I wanna put out there first. First of all, this is going to be interesting. I'm going to have to look at the statistics because I believe at about 45 seconds, everyone's going to stop watching this video because I didn't shoot any footage of the test drive itself. So it's just going to be me and Cliff talking about the test drive, and click, there they go. Anyway, no, it's just going to be Cliff and I talking about the test drive itself. So I just want to set expectations right away. I don't run one of those clickbaity YouTube channels. This is just us chatting.
Well, we can just we will do our best to create a beautiful mental
picture
picture for you of what
and
it's
also
like.
I'm kind of new to this whole YouTube thing, and B, it never occurred to me that we might actually do a YouTube recording on it. It was just something that we did because my wife and I are in the process of shopping for an EV. So I wanted to first talk about that, and then we can get into the experience of driving the Tesla Model 3 Performance Edition. So, first of all, my wife and I are shopping for a new car for a couple of different reasons. A, we have a son that's turning 15, so he's going to need his own car sometime within the next year. Oh, shut up, Wordle! God damn it!
There's a
I forgot. Okay, so mental note when making YouTube videos: mute your Google Home. Anyway, so my wife and I have a 15-year-old son who is going to need a car of his own. And when we say need, we're using the air quotes need. But still, so we're looking for a new car for that. And second of all, both of our cars are getting a little long in the tooth. So it's time to start poking around and seeing what options are available out there. Now, my wife and I are not buying a new car in 2022. I can pretty much guarantee that. This is going to be much more of a 2023 thing. Very largely because of that new bill that just got passed with the renewed $7,500 EV credit.
So here's a question about that though, because
yeah,
I haven't investigated it, but when that was first signed, there were some caveats to it in terms of what vehicles that are out there now will actually qualify for that. And I know they all have to be made in the United States. I think that's one of the big ones. But it was my understanding that Tesla vehicles would not qualify for that.
So here's the thing, and every dealership that we've talked to about this have given us the same answer, which is to say the cement hasn't really set on that particular bill yet. The government still isn't really sure exactly what cars are going to qualify and what cars are not going to qualify. Some of the basic new bill 101 things to know is the previous tax credit had a cap on the number of cars that a manufacturer could sell in order to for customers to receive that tax credit. Now, I don't know what the government was thinking about that. Like, oh no, Tesla's way too popular. We can't give Tesla customers a credit. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me because now you're not impacting the company so much as you're impacting the customers. But I also know that they wanted to encourage a number of manufacturers to get into the EV space. So it's like, a lot of I guess the thinking was a lot of companies might be sitting back and saying, well, everyone's just going to go buy a Tesla, so why should we bother making one? Well, I guess maybe that's what this was designed to do. But anyway, so there are a few criteria, and I'm mainly familiar with the one that first of all, there is a price cap on cars and SUVs. So an electric car over $55,000 and an electric SUV over $80,000 do not qualify.
Okay.
So right now, the only car that Tesla makes is the Model 3. not the Model 3 Performance Edition, not the Model 3 Long Range Edition, but just the base Model 3, which starts at about 46,000, I think.
Right. For
the
now,
the Model Y may also qualify for that because the Model Y may be listed as an SUV, although the government hasn't made a ruling on that yet. The government hasn't said whether they consider the Model Y an SUV or not.
that's
And
interesting.
and honestly, I kind of get why, because when you look at a Model 3 and a Model Y next to each other, they're very similar cars. So there's a little bit more interior space in the Model Y, granted, but
Yeah.
there are very few things about a Model Y that scream SUV. Anyway, so there's that. And then the second major point is that the car needs to be assembled in the United States, and the battery needs to be assembled within the United States. Or I don't know if it's assembled or mined or something having to do with building the battery has to be done in the US, which that I kind of get. The United States wants to encourage home manufacturing. Totally get that. Totally down with that. So the number of EVs that are included are limited, and that is not coincidentally the range of cars that my wife and I are looking to buy. Now, we have gone outside those parameters in terms of our shopping list. But most notably, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 got added to the list recently, which is an electric SUV that starts at like 40,000 and has 300 miles of range.
I love the Ioniq 5. It's such a and then it's kissing cousin, the Kia EV6, which also is around that same price range. Right, such good looking vehicles.
Yeah. So, but up until recently, the primary 3 EVs that we were looking at that fall underneath the tax credit are the Volkswagen ID4, which is actually built in a dedicated plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So it should qualify for the credit. And the Volkswagen was another dealership that said, yeah, we're not 100% sure about that yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we looked at the ID4. We have actually test driven that one already. The Model 3 is the second one. And then the third one is the Chevy Bolt EUV. Not the Bolt EV, the Bolt EUV, which is kind of like Chevy's like Bolt EV, but a little bit bigger. So
right. It's like Bolt Plus, basically.
Yeah. It's kind of like a Bolt Plus. So we have not been able to test drive that yet because no dealership in the Chicagoland area has one on the lot. Because according to the dealerships that I have spoken with, those are driving off the lot the day they come in.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that, because right now Chevrolet's got a promotion where in addition to the $7,500 tax credit that you get, which does apply right now, you also, I believe, Chevrolet is installing a home charger for you.
They will do that, yeah, and so that is
free with it.
Yeah.
So
now, so
there are disadvantages to that vehicle. Sorry,
there are disadvantages.
Well, okay, so it's in terms of charging speed, because both the Bolt and the Bolt EUV are based on an older charging technology, which means I believe it's 30 volts instead of 60. I could be wrong. And so, yeah, your charging times are longer. I mean, and that's what I mean by the disadvantage.
Yeah. No, that's a big one.
It is, especially I don't think it would be such a disadvantage if you were just driving it around Chicago, right? But if you're on a trip and then you're on with a public charger, you're having to wait a lot longer in order to charge it. So
it's interesting. Okay, that's a good note. I did not know about that. So, and see, you're the car guy, so that's why I kind of want to talk to you about this anyway. But anyway, so the main reason we're looking at an EV is, and I had to explain this to my mom, because my mom is, bless her heart, she's a little on the cheap side, but she's like, why aren't EVs expensive? Why are you looking at EVs when you could be getting a normal car? And in fairness to my mom, when we bought our last car, we literally looked up SUV sort by price and went with the top of the list. So, and that's how we ended up with our Mitsubishi Outlander, which has been fine. The car is fine, but my wife is kind of like, well, we're in our mid 40s now. Can we get a car that we can actually enjoy? And I'm like, yeah, that's fair. That is entirely fair. And if it's electric and I'm still freelancing at the time, maybe we could even write some of it off.
Right.
So if we do a podcast about it, that's a $40,000 write-off. No, that's not how it works.
So
you can only write off a portion of it, but still.
Right. So you and I had a discussion a few months ago about, because I think this is when you really started more seriously looking into this. And if I remember right, your original part of your criteria was that you wanted a 7-passenger electric vehicle, to which I said, well, yeah, you're going to be getting into like the $80,000 and above range, I think, because there's just not a whole lot out there.
There isn't.
Right
and
now. Yeah.
and we have kind of jettisoned the whole third row seating requirement. Back when my wife and I bought our last car, which was the Outlander, it was 2013. At the time, we had a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old.
Oh, wow.
A third row seating car would have made a ton of sense because, when you travel with kids, especially, you got to take a whole lot of crap with you.
Oh, yes.
And let me tell you, the clown car situations that we were in when we did go on road trips with 2 kids that age in that car, we were literally shoving pillows in between car seats and putting stuff down like below their feet. It was crazy. Like the Tetris situations we had to get into.
I totally understand. My wife and I also have an Outlander Sport.
Okay,
so that's our largest vehicle. So.
And you have 1 kid.
Yes, exactly.
So, but anyway, and so my wife has always in the back of her mind said, I want third row seating on my next car. Our friends have a Ford. What's not the Expedition, the one below it. Explorer, yeah. So, which is fairly spacious, and my wife's gone on a couple of
EV. It's a mid-size SUV.
Yeah. So my wife's gone on a couple of road trips with her, and she's like, yeah, that's a really nice. It's really nice to have a truck that you could just kind of spread out in, which is fun. But at the same time, we've both kind of recognized that our kids don't want to go anywhere with us anymore. So third row seating is not necessarily the most important thing. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about EVs. So I was telling my mom about this, and she's like, well, why do you want to get an EV? I'm like, well, that's you read the writing on the wall. That's kind of where things are going. California is, I don't know if they passed the bill, but they proposed a bill where they're not even going to sell gas cars after 2035. Which is, when you think about it, not too far away. This is a pretty bold step.
And,
so
there are several states that follow the lead of California and doing that same thing. And I think actually Virginia might be one of those, although I could be wrong. So
yeah. So the thing is, the writing's on the wall. Gas is like so 2021. But so my mom's like, well, yeah, but that's probably not really going to kick in for another 8 to 10 years. And I'm like, well, how long do you think we're going to hold on to a car? That's about the right time frame when you think about it. So anyway, that's kind of why we're looking for an EV. It just kind of makes sense. And the charging while on road trips is a major concern. One of our cars only has about 40,000 miles on it. So we're going to hold on to that car definitely. And that'll probably be our road trip car if we take road trips. Otherwise, it honestly might just boil down to we're just going to fly and rent a car wherever we get there.
Right.
But anyway, so now let's kind of transition over. We're about 15 minutes in. Let's transition over to the real disappointment of this show, the Tesla test drive without the footage. So I went yesterday to do a test drive. And let me just point out that my wife was ill. She was not able to go with me on the test drive, but we already had the appointment and I had to fight for that appointment. So we kept the appointment anyway. Myself and my 2 children went with. So my wife definitely wants to do a test drive, and she absolutely needs to.
Don't ever make the mistake of what my dad used to do all the time, which was to buy a car without consulting your spouse.
Oh my God. I wouldn't even consider that. Anyway, so we're so that being said, we are going to take another test drive, and trust me, I will take footage on that one. So, and we'll have another discussion about this. But anyway, so we got to the dealership, and we decided to do. They said, "Do you want to do a Model 3 Performance or just a Model 3 Standard?" I'm like, may as well do Performance. Why not? And so we, so okay, so the interior of the car is very nice. There are a couple of things that like they have a couple of compartments where, like you open up the compartment, you got this big cavernous space in there where you can like drop things in there. They have a couple of those in like the center console, and like just to me it kind of felt like a bit of a waste of space. Like it's just like, we have some space here, let's just enclose it and turn it into a compartment, rather than something a little bit more utility. Like I can't even, like, how sometimes with the armrest they have like the thing where you can like pull up the thing, and here's a shallow thing, and then you
The
can
in
pull up
between
the other
seats
thing.
with storage and
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
place for your garage door opener and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So like there's no place where you could just like toss something small and like easily retrieve it, when you need it. So, but that's like one minor downside,
So
but
let's actually just set the
okay.
stage here, right? So
Yeah.
you're the one that's been on the actual test drive, but
Mhm.
I just the Model 3 and Tesla interiors, but specifically the Model Y and the Model 3, which are more of a certain like in a certain price bracket, right? And so they've been designed similarly in this way. Is
They're
that
the iPhone 14 and the iPhone
right?
14 Plus of the Tesla
Correct.
line. They're not the Pros.
So the Model 3, unlike the Model S, which is the high end, or even I think it's the Model X, which is
X.
the high end SUV,
Yeah.
you do not have a gauge cluster in front of you.
No, you do
It's
not.
just a dash with nothing. Everything is on that center
That's the center
LCD
screen.
screen, right?
Mhm.
Which is kind of
So,
interesting.
yeah, and so it is interesting, and like all your controls are there, and all your navigation is there. You adjust your mirrors there. You even open your glove compartment and your trunk from
Hmm.
that screen. I mean, and the glove compartment does not have a button on it, like to open it. It's so kind of weird, but also kind of neat.
Yeah,
Um,
Tesla basically said, okay, we, compared to like your traditional automotive manufacturers, which have a legacy of certain things that they're living up to, and traditionally, I think when you look at their electric vehicle interiors, are more like a standard car interior with physical
right,
buttons. But
right.
Tesla doesn't have any any baggage in that respect, and so that it really was like a clean sheet for them. And so
Yeah.
there's like no physical controls at all,
Well, that's not true.
except for like
Um,
I think the turn signals and things like
well,
that.
okay. So there is a turn signal uh,
Stock.
cluster. There's also a shifter on the right
Right.
side of the
Right.
steering wheel. So those two things have physical controls, but also the steering wheel itself has two kind of like roller wheel D-pad type thing. They're kind of
Hmm.
like D-pads where they kind of roll up and down, and they you can push them side to side, and you can also push them in.
Right.
So kind of D-pad ish, and there's one on each side of the wheel, and you can actually use those controls to adjust what is currently selected on the screen. So if you want to turn up the volume of the radio, you can use those controls on it. If you want to adjust your mirrors, you select which mirror you want to adjust, and then you use those controls to move things left and right. So for those who are worried that like it's all touchscreen all the time, that's not entirely true unless you're the passenger of the car, in which case it is
Right.
all touchscreen all the time. And that, I'll be honest, I'm not really a fan of. I kind of like physical controls, at least for some functions like volume, like heating, like
Right.
stuff like that. I want to have physical controls for that, even if I am a passenger. So that is kind of a strike against Tesla in my mind. Um, and I'm also not terribly fond of the user interface of that center console, just because like there's a lot of you have to like swipe away a lot of screens in order to get to the last screen, and you have to like know where all the controls are, because I mean you hit the menu button, and there's like a dozen and a half tabs that you can pick from, including everything from adjusting your mirrors all the way down to like autopilot controls and navigation. And it's just like, I'm not sure all that belongs in the same menu. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of like the iPhone philosophy of cars, where you just put all your settings in one menu and leave it up to the user to like find them. So which is, I mean, I get it, it's fine, it's a way to do things, but
I
like
I am with.
everything. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I am with you in terms of um when I'm thinking about an electric vehicle. I still feel like I would like to have physical controls as an option for things like you hit your heating and air conditioning, right?
Yeah, and you know
Things that are
what,
tactile that you can actually reach out for without having to take
with
your eyes
muscle
off the
memory.
road.
Yeah,
Right. I
but
feel like that's safer, and I feel like, especially if someone besides myself, which I might have a little bit of an easier time with something like the Tesla, but for someone that, I mean, even if our wives are used
not
to a touch
not
screen, right? They
yeah.
might not be quite as intuitive at finding things at first, right? And so having those physical controls for certain things, I think it still makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
And to differing degrees, different manufacturers are doing it different ways. So
yeah. So getting into the driving experience itself, what I really like is you can put the seat and the steering wheel basically anywhere you want it to be. And,
hmm,
so you can adjust the steering wheel up and down. You can bring it forward or back. You can, adjust your seat, in 1,000 different ways. And that's also customized to every driver. So when my wife goes to get in the car, the Tesla's going to know, oh, that's Jamie. I should put
right,
settings to here and like move it that way. You can also use the Tesla app to like turn on your air conditioning 4 minutes before you go out to the car. I mean, it's really kind of cool, like the things that you can
right.
do.
And that's the thing we
Yeah.
should discuss too, is that there is no key for a
Hmm.
Tesla Model 3. Your key is your phone.
Your key is your phone, or I think they have like a
It's like a
card that you
fob,
can
right?
use,
Or
like an
card. That's right.
NFC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have a card for guests if you want to allow somebody else to drive it. That basically has, I don't know if it's NFC. I'm not sure what it is, but that lets them know that they are a guest driver and can actually operate it. But there's not even like there's no lock on the outside of the car.
Right. Right. And like I should point out that I haven't, all of my all of my home locks at home are smart locks.
Right.
So I haven't carried keys from my house in like 3 years now.
Wow.
And the only keys I carry are car keys. And if we get a Tesla, we don't have to carry car keys anymore either. I mean,
Awesome.
it's like really kind of cool. But I also wonder like how easy it is to switch from phone to phone, because that obviously is going to be a concern for me.
Right.
Because I mean, think about it from a security standpoint. You don't want it to be easy to switch from phone to phone, but from a phone reviewer standpoint, you really kind of want it to be easy switching from phone to phone.
We'll just be living
Um,
that two phone life.
right, exactly. So now getting out on the road, there's a lot of things that are come standard in a Tesla that maybe not are not necessarily standard on a lot of cars. First of all, we've all seen the YouTube videos of the footage that a Tesla can capture, and they've got like two different versions of this footage, where there's one where like while you're driving, it will constantly record and delete over itself. And then if there's an incident or you get into an accident, you can hit the download button and it'll save like 5 minutes of footage leading up to and following that incident or something like that. So you can give that to the police and say, this dude cut me off, and it gives you that footage from all the different cameras. And I want to say there's like 4 different cameras that are recording like all the time. So that can be handy. Also, when you signal left or right, it shows you the reverse footage on the screen of that direction. So you can see, like, if you're changing lanes, you can see if anybody's there, stuff like that.
Yeah, that is so nice.
When you throw it into reverse, not only do you get the reverse camera, but also the mirrors automatically adjust down a little bit so you can see better, backing up, which is, a lot of cars do that, but it's still kind of cool. And then while you're driving, there are, at least in the car that we drove, there were 2 modes of driving, one called sport and one called chill. And sport,
Mm,
Now remember, we were driving a Tesla Model 3 Performance Edition, and I don't know how much of a roller coaster fan you are.
I love roller coasters, yes.
So they have the types of so most roller coasters go up a hill and then they drop you down a hill. But there are some roller coasters that you sit in a car and then they just launch you.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you've been on any of those. We've got one here in Great America. We've got one here in Great America called Max Force, which goes from 0 to 70 in like 2 seconds.
Holy cow.
The Tesla Model 3 is very Max Force-ish. I mean, like we tested that a few times and it was just like, okay, the light turned green.
Yes.
And let me just be clear. I'm not dramatizing that. That is basically what happens. I mean, it is like insane amounts of power instantly, and you are just gone. I mean, like you are just like, I literally almost lost my grip on the steering wheel on a couple of occasions because it was that.
Well, it's instant. It's instant.
It's instant.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. Now, chill, I would probably sit and chill because honestly, sport is just too much power. I do not need it. Like, I can't think of a single instance where I need that much power, which is fair. I mean, you know, I would imagine a lot of people would like to have that power, but my God, like I have never been in a vehicle with that kind of power that instantly, except for a roller coaster. And that should be telling you something about the experience.
So as you've been sitting here and talking, the first thing I was thinking of questions, right? Like things that I wanted to know your experience about things. I think that most people actually one of those when they first experience an SUV, especially a Tesla or an electric vehicle, especially a Tesla, it's sort of some things that are different, right? Obviously the first one of those was I was going to ask you how you like the power, because it is immediate.
It is immediate and it is a lot.
Right, exactly. The other part of that too is, you know, normally when you have a fast car like that, I mean, it's making a lot of noise. It's usually a muscle car or like an exotic car, which, you know, tend to just have loud raucous engines. You just sounded like an animal mating call.
So do some cars.
Like a giant goose just out there looking for a mate.
Yep.
But there's like basically you hear road noise and wind noise.
Yeah, I mean there is a little bit of a.
Yeah, they've actually had to add that.
Yeah, and I kind of wondered like how much of that was like added noise and how much of it was like, because like I have an electric bike, you know, which is obviously not a major comparison here, but like when the motor kicks in on my bike, I get kind of like a you know, as it's turning. So I kind of wonder like how much of that is actual like motor noise, but it's not a lot. And they actually said the tires on a Tesla are specially coated on the inside to like muffle them because otherwise they would be too loud for the car.
Right.
Like what?
and most of that added noise is actually for the outside, because they had the government actually mandated that vehicles that run on battery power under a certain speed, whether that at the time, I think it was actually hybrid vehicles that were running off of battery power up to like 30 miles an hour, but then electric vehicles, they have to make some sort of noise when you're, so that pedestrians can hear you if they're doing something like walking and texting, so they don't get hit by the otherwise almost silent, you know, electric vehicle, which I think is really funny, because the one like each different manufacturer has a little bit of a different sound. Like I've heard some that almost sound like a Jetsons vehicle.
Yeah, okay.
Not quite that loud, but it's got a little bit of that like future like bubble car feel going on.
Yeah, I don't remember what the ID4 sounded like, but yeah, it was also equally quiet, and the turning radius on the ID4 is tiny.
Yeah,
like you can almost like You know, like how they have those cars that'll like, or they don't have those cars, but you've seen like TV shows with those cars that like pull up next to a spot and the wheels turn sideways and just pull
Mhm.
in. That's kind of like what the ID4 does. I mean, it's a super tight rate. You could almost turn that car around in a parking lot with cars on both sides of you. Like
What
it
have you
is
seen the
super tight.
what the Hummer electric vehicle can do?
Yeah, it does the crab
The
walking.
crab walk, yeah, you
Yeah,
literally can turn it's like a zero turn radius mower. I mean, it can turn within its
yeah,
own space, which is crazy, but
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
also a gigantic vehicles and extremely expensive. So
Right,
that's
right.
not really in the category of vehicle that we're talking
That's
about.
not
But
on the list.
there really
But anyway,
there
so
really
we
are
should.
some neat party tricks with electric vehicles. I was going to ask you one other thing too.
Yeah.
So okay, so obviously power, um, the like veritable silence when you're on the inside,
Hmm.
and that was one other thing. Oh well, we'll if I think of it, we'll come back to it later. I think the main thing was just when you get into something like that and you're trying to get oriented, like because it's not the same as getting into your the touch points are similar but not exactly the same as your traditional sedan. How long did it take you to get acclimated before you drove it? And I'm sure that the dealership actually walked you through some of that. But
Yeah, he had to walk me through about 5 minutes of like, showing me how to how to adjust the mirrors, how to
right,
adjust the steering wheel, how to switch from sport mode to chill mode, which I'm glad they showed me. Also how to adjust it. The one other thing that really kind of took a little bit of time to get used to was the regenerative braking.
that's
That,
what I was
that,
gonna.
that
I literally that was the other thing was it is basically because you was the regenerative braking because you have to learn to basically engine brake.
Yeah, so basically, and just for the people that are listening, the way a Tesla, and you can use the brake if you want, but the way the regenerative braking works is it's kind of like a throttle. It's basically like your gas pedal is basically like a throttle,
Hmm.
where you hold it to go forward, and when you release it, you actually start to slow down and then actually stop. So like the amount that you're pushing on the pedal is determines the speed that you're going, but the amount that you let off on the pedal shows you how you're slowing down. And the one thing I didn't ask the dealership was, when it comes to a regenerative braking, like what happens with brake lights when you let off on the gas? Do the brake lights come on to let people know, to let people behind you know that you're slowing down? Because if they do, that seems like it'd be really annoying, because
Brake lights
sometimes you
on
just
all the
want to
time.
coast.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, when you're coming up to a red light, you need to coast for a little bit before you actively start to slow down. So I'm kind of wondering, what the brake lights looked like behind me while I was doing that. I would imagine probably better safe than sorry. They probably come on right away whenever you let off on the pedal a little bit.
yeah. I don't know. I honestly don't
Mm,
know. Although having driven behind Teslas, I don't see that happen
yeah.
all the time. So I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. So now you can use the brake if you want. But for my
Right.
test drive,
Right.
I didn't, because I figured, kind of like when in Rome. So, um, so yeah, it was definitely interesting. And I think if you let off on the gas and switch over to the brake, you actually just slow down faster.
Yeah.
But one of the nice things about the regenerative braking is, like you said, it was engine braking. So because of that, the brakes on a Tesla actually last a lot longer
Hmm.
than on a typical car, because you're not riding the brake all the time. You're basically letting the engine do the work of slowing down, and at the same time, I think you're also getting the benefit of it's recharging the battery just a little bit,
Hmm.
because it's using that
It's
that
recapturing
energy.
energy. Hmm.
It's recapturing that energy and putting it back
Hmm.
into the battery, which is nice. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't make a ton of difference. But anyway, so we should kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, I think it actually shows you on the somewhere in like the metrics of how much you're actually recapturing through regenerative
Mm,
braking.
yeah,
Did you this is my last question, like did
yeah.
you have a chance to use the maps to kind of see what's I would imagine in Chicago there's actually a lot, but what's available around you as far as charging points and
There
like
are
the
a there are a ton of charging things around in the city of Chicago. The nearest one to me is about 20 minutes away because I'm out in the suburbs of
Okay.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the nearest supercharger. There are EV chargers around my area. The closest one is like 5 minutes away, but I believe that's a level 1 charger, which is not going to do a whole hell of a lot of
No.
good. And that's the kind of thing where you have to like leave it overnight, and there's no hotel there, so I'm not really sure why they bothered with that, but whatever. um, but in terms of like Tesla charging, I want to say the closest one to us is like Woodfield Mall, which is about 15 minutes away, 20 minutes away from us. Although I kind of wonder if like the Tesla dealership, which is actually closer than Woodfield, wonder if they have a charger that you could use.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
That would make sense when
Yeah,
you
it
really
would.
stop and think about it. So, really, what it boils down to is there are a couple of reasons why you might want to buy a Tesla. And, first of all, it is the iPhone of EVs. It's an aspirational vehicle. Like, it is a Tesla, capital T. So the second reason is probably the charging network. Like, the charging network is extensive. My wife has a cottage out in like rural Michigan where the nearest town is like 20 minutes away. And so I was telling my wife, I'm like, if we get an EV, we cannot take it to your cottage because the closest charger is about 100 miles away. Or I should say the closest Electrify America charger is 100 miles away. There are 2 Tesla charging stations within the town that is like 20 minutes away from my wife's cottage. So if we get a Tesla, I guess we could still go to the cottage. But if we get any
you're
other
saying
kind of
a
non-Tesla
EV.
EV charger is like 100 miles away, which is kind of silly because you're going to use half your mileage getting back to the cottage. So the charging network is definitely arguably the most attractive thing about a Tesla, which honestly, when you think about it, the infrastructure is the most attractive thing about your car. That really shouldn't be. And this could spawn a different podcast where we talk about why Tesla at this point should just go ahead and license its supercharger network to other EVs. Because I think at the start, it made sense for Tesla to say, no, this is our network. Nobody else can use it. But now that there are other options out there and a lot of other options out there, I think Tesla's actually kind of silly to not license those chargers because when you think about it, Tesla could charge an extra 60% on like a non-Tesla 60% fee for people to use their chargers. They would be raking in money. But anyway,
absolutely.
We can put on our Elon Musk hats another time. But
the other advantage used to be basically it was more when the Model S was their only model outside of the original Tesla Roadster, was that using the network, their charging network was free.
Right.
And so I think the only way you can get that now is if you actually go back and buy one of those, like the first like 3 or 4 years of Model S, because it's you're grandfathered in, even if you're not the first owner. Although, I mean, fun. It's not a big deal, but
yeah, it's not that big of a deal. But anyway, so like that's kind of the biggest reason why you'd want to buy a Tesla. And I actually have a friend of mine who just bought a Tesla Model Y Performance Edition. So they're taking delivery sometime this week, so this is not the last ride I'm going to take in a Tesla, that is to be sure. But so like where we will ultimately land in this EV journey, I don't know. I think it probably will not be on a Tesla, to be perfectly honest, because I don't know. There was like enough about it that I didn't like. Oh, navigation. That was one last thing I wanted to touch on. As far as I know, the navigation is only like a top-down look at where you are. You can't get that Google Maps-ish like vehicle view of a navigation, like when you're pulling up to a corner, like it's, has the arrow that goes, you can only look from a top down. I did not like that. So
it is interesting that Tesla so far has decided to roll its own software.
Yeah. And there's no Tesla, Android Auto, no Apple CarPlay.
Right. And Tesla, I mean, I heard this comparison the other day, and I think it's kind of interesting that, most of your ICE manufacturers, your internal combustion engine manufacturers that are traditional vehicles that are now getting into electric vehicles are full of like mechanical engineers more, and they're having to bump up on the software side, right? Like whereas Tesla really has been a software first company. And you
Mm-hmm.
can see that in their approach to like the interior, which is all mostly done through a touchscreen on a Tesla, versus you still have a lot of hard points for things in the interior, which we've kind of discussed. Within Tesla has had to catch up on just manufacturing cars. I mean, that was their real struggle, was just on quality, panel gaps, the things that people that are traditional luxury car buyers expect out of
Pay
vehicles,
attention
right?
to, yeah.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
so they're coming to the middle from different approaches depending on what company you're talking about. And it's not just Tesla. I mean, I'm sure we'll discuss this later, but there's other what you call startup manufacturers. I mean, Tesla, I wouldn't call it a startup anymore. I mean, they're one. I think they sold more luxury vehicles than anybody else in the United States last
That
year, which
tracks.
is just amazing.
Yeah.
But
So,
then but you got Rivian, you've
mhm.
got Lucid, and there are several more that are on the precipice of launching vehicles in the United States, and that's not even mentioning the bevy of electrical vehicles that are available in Asia that we can't even get here, specifically in China. There are some really
Yeah.
good Chinese electric vehicles that
And there are
are
a lot
more
of
similar to Tesla.
there are a lot of EVs coming from traditional car manufacturers that
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
just down the pipe. Like, I know, if it wasn't for the fact that we had to wait until 2024, I know we would definitely want to look at a Blazer EV,
Yeah.
from Chevy. So, but that's not coming for a couple of more
And the Equinox,
years.
actually, they
But
just launched as
yeah,
well. And it's
so
interesting because GM has taken a very like I guess you could call it like not, well, maybe not Tesla approach, but they are ahead of the game in a lot of ways when it comes to um, their approach to electric vehicles, because they basically have done the skateboard approach and a modular approach. So it's
yeah, where
basically
they
just
just
a
set the body on top of the platform.
exactly, and then it's
Yeah,
expandable. And because of that, I believe Honda, who's not adventured into the most they've done with anything electric powered has been hybrid vehicles. But I believe Honda just partnered with GM to be their partner for developing electric vehicles. So
yeah,
yeah, I think that's something that you're going to see is traditional manufacturers kind of partnering up, and so you'll see maybe a lot of like common stuff shared under the hood,
yeah.
so to speak, between them all, because
I've
that's
also
that to me would be like the big struggle. And I know we need to wrap it up here, but it's
yeah,
just I was thinking about this the other day, and it's as manufacturers go towards more electric vehicles being their bread and butter, how do you differentiate? Because before you could have a Ferrari has like a very distinctive engine sound,
mhm,
and so every different brand kind of had its own personality. But when you're going to all electric motors, I mean, other than I guess your choices in like software and the color palette and design of things, like what really differentiates you?
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you know what? We need to put you and Chris Davies onto a podcast together and just chat about this for like 3 hours,
Right,
and
right.
that would be amazing.
It would be fun.
Um, but for now, we need to go ahead and wrap things up. So,
Mhm.
as I was saying before, I honestly don't think my wife and I are going to land on a Tesla. I think we're probably going to go a different route. And it's not because there's anything necessarily bad about a Tesla. It's just there are a couple of things that I think, just as a traditional car driver, a Tesla doesn't do exactly the way I want it to do. And so, there were some UI issues with the whole center screen. I don't think I'm quite there. I'm not going to say anything bad about people who do buy a Tesla, because they're really amazing cars. But, having driven one, it's I can see why people would want to buy it. But,
Right.
we'll follow me on this podcast, on this EV journey, and we'll see where we eventually land, probably somewhere in 2023. But for now, I just wanted to share some thoughts, because
Right.
this is the beginning of my journey, and Tesla is good at SEO. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Once again, I am Adam Dowd, Dead Technology on Twitter. That is Cliff Thomas. If you like this video and you want to hear more about EVs, and you want to hear more about my EV journey specifically, let us know in the comments down below, because I can say that now because we're a YouTube channel
Yeah.
again.
Like and
So
subscribe. Maybe there's a
like
bell
and
up here somewhere.
subscribe, do the bell, and leave a comment down below. And if we get this video up to 200,000 likes, I will buy a Tesla. How about that?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up, and stay tuned for our next Tesla podcast when I actually have footage.